We're going to roll now into my friend Jeremy McDonald on tonight's seminar, Raising Rebels in a Street Addicted World. And for those, a few that weren't here, I'll use the same photo. This is maybe all you know about Jeremy. Those good looking pictures there. It was leg day last night, he told me. And like, he asked for a toga. His legs are like so sore and you know, today. Good
I need another embarrassing story of you. I don't have, I used my good one last night, so let me think about it.
Yeah. So anyways, Jer is here. He was here last night. We learned a lot from him, and we're just so thankful to have you here. Can I pray for you, Jer?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Dear Lord, love very much. Thank you for this time with our friends, with these families, with people that are just like seeking to learn how to invest in their kids differently, maybe a little bit sharper, but also I think looking for support. And like I said last night, like there's a map to this, and sometimes you don't know what to do, but Jer, you know, he's going to help take us through some really helpful practical things tonight. So I pray that we would see you, Lord, you know, we would be encouraged, and that we would also just fall more in love with you as we see the hope that you bring. So God, you're good. Good for friend Jeremy who's here. He's so awesome. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen. It is wonderful to be back and to be with you. If you don't know me, if you weren't here last night, I want to make sure that you recognize I do have some experience parenting. These are my not screen addicted. We're grateful, but in a screen. I thought that's kind of cute. I have 3 kids. This is Riker, Archer, and Ember. And then this is my wife and I, Chantel. She's a school teacher on the East Coast, and we live in Moncton, New Brunswick. It has been beautiful. I've been here for now about a week. We hosted that Next Gen conference this last weekend, the organization that I work for called Youth Worker Community. It is nice to go back home. Moncton has got lots of perks to it if you've ever been to the East Coast. One of the perks is our real estate. So for example, this is not my home, but this is a home currently for sale. So if you're ever feeling like it's time to get a move on, this home, if you can imagine, is just under 4,000 square feet on 4.5 acres of property. It is beautiful, although it is snowy, and it's selling for $695,000. And so just saying, of all the things that could happen here tonight, I could get a few of you to come and hang out. Could be all right. But we've enjoyed meeting lots of folks over the pandemic. We did get lots of folks coming from BC and Toronto and coming to experience a wonderful part of the country. But let me just say, as somebody that gets to travel around, honestly, not much compares with the beautiful weather and sun and the people that are here in Abbotsford that I've experienced for the last week. Now, we are going to talk about screens. We're going to talk about technology. And the cool part about this conversation is we were trying to raise kids in the midst of this technologically infused world is that the challenges that they're facing, there are some new, but there are some that have been around for a little while, which is helpful for us because it gives us a bit of a lens to learn from. And perhaps you might remember, some of you, judging by your ages, this example.
Weird geysers, Defender, Pac-Man, asteroids. To fans, they represent a challenge. But to critics... Well, they come as if from outer space in a variety of weird geysers. Defender, Pac-Man, asteroids. To fans, they represent a challenge. But to critics, as Terry Drinkwater reports, they are a menace.
Come on in. It's almost another world here in the video arcades of America. 1 billion games are played every month, a quarter each for Escape, which can last a long time if you're skilled. Pit yourself against the computer. Millions, mostly teenagers, have. So many, in fact, that psychologists are beginning to worry that some youths are becoming spaced out on the space games.
You can't get hooked on it.
Are you?
Yeah. It keeps on making you play the game. Once you start to play it for a while, you keep on playing it.
Any normal person would want to beat the machine.
And you come back?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Yeah.
Many cities have reacted by making the arcades off limits to all under 17 from 8 to 3. This is the after-school rush in Oakland. Long hours at the screens, psychologists say, can lead to extreme introversion. Youngsters communicating in a video fantasy land and not with their peers or parents.
It's not addictive in the sense of a drug dependency where you're going to have withdrawal symptoms, but it is you can become physically dependent upon it because you get an arousal and then a relaxation response. It's the same as a roller coaster or gambling or playing cards intensely.
Many teenagers are frank in admitting their dependency.
Well, it's the moving lights partly. Some of these games are really hard to do. It just takes a lot of skill, hand-eye coordination, and it doesn't cost as much as some other things, and it's legal.
Yeah, it's addictive. It is. Because you sit there and you just want to play it more and more.
We don't really prefer to use the word addictive. We think it's associated with negative connotations. We prefer to use the term compelling and highly popular, which obviously they are.
And the manufacturers add they teach a bit about computers, too. This is the current craze game, Pac-Man.
I like the little man. He's really neat. He eats up all the other things, you know.
How about that Pac-Man song that I hear around here all the time?
Yeah, you sing it a lot. You hum it.
Indeed, and play it on the jukebox at full volume. Psychologists remind us every younger generation has to have something.
Anybody willing to admit they played a little bit of Pac-Man? And there's a couple K. Craig? Yeah, that's great. That's great. I show that because it has been an ongoing conversation. 1982. Concerns, obviously, psychologists weighing in and wondering what the effect would be on this next generation. And it's not to belittle the challenges and the issues that we're facing today. They're much different, and obviously the technology is much more intense. But the great news is that, like I said, we have been wrestling through, as things change in our world, what does it mean to raise up our kids to be thoughtful, to raise up our kids to not be addicted to the screens. And although it's funny to look at, truthfully, there were lots of kids that were addicted legitimately to things like going to the arcade. And so we can learn and recognize throughout the course of the last number of years that there's things that have become challenges and things that have become issues. And so what we'll do here tonight is kind of do a breeze through of some of these types of challenges and then talk through what are some kind of current best practices as we are raising kids, wanting them to be kind of formed thoughtfully, to be able to be resistant to some of the dangers of these kinds of things. But it's helpful to know kind of where we've come from. So right from the 80s, this idea of like the screens kind of came in. They came in as content or as games. You know, the rise of even the television was really shocking to lots of people, but then arcades, you remember Nintendos, there's tons of, if you just YouTube it, it's actually really funny to watch. The craze of Nintendo and the other kind of gaming consoles. And so that was certainly seemed like a challenge, and it seemed like that was going to be devastating. And then it was completely new and different when all of a sudden that we got the internet. And so you remember when the internet came into people's homes, it wasn't just that it was a computer, but you had that dial-up connection, you have that sound that nobody knows anymore, but that you would remember and can reflect on. And the internet brought this whole new wave of technology that, again, was trying to figure out what do we do to parent in and through this as the way that we access information completely changes. And then that, as we were starting to feel like maybe we got a handle on it, all of a sudden smartphones and social media came along. 2007, 2009, this time when all of a sudden things in the ways that our kids were able to connect with one another was dramatically changing. And I'm 38, so I remember when cell phones, when they first came out, and then they got smaller and smaller and smaller, and it was like the high-class cell phone was the smallest one that you could find. And then all of a sudden, smartphones came out, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And as we looked to the foldable phones and things that continue to kind of grow in that tech space, you realize it's gone this other direction. And then now, although we haven't solved this, we now have this new, fresh issue around screens and technology that is AI and the implications that our kids will be wrestling with around the use of AI tools and the things that it's influencing, which seems like possibly everything. So just as this is not perfect, but this is just maybe to spark some conversation, some ideas. When screens first came out, we started, and you kind of heard this in the article or in the news report, that there's this nervousness about fragmented attention, about weak self-regulation, that kids would become addicted, they'd be kind of zoned into this, and that there wouldn't be an ability for them to, at extreme examples, learn or have more thoughtful conversations, that the screens were kind of destroying a lot of the just natural things about being able to walk around and talk to people in the world. And that continues to be something that we're pretty nervous about today. The internet brought lots with it, lots of positive things, but a couple things that as parents that we find can be very discouraging and very challenging is the dangerous amount of exposure. The internet has a wide, obviously, range of things. It's got message boards with predators, it's got pornography, it's got our ability for our kids to access information that we just do not want them to experience. And then even if you are able to protect, and we're going to talk about some ideas on how to do that, just the nature of the internet is a different way to access information. All of a sudden, everything is before us. And I have a friend that's done some research on this. The idea of being able to access everything makes it actually, that access, it becomes a challenge. And so there's this sense of infobesity that we have too much at our disposal and there's too much that kind of comes at us. And the internet brought that along. Social media on smartphones, a lot of the statistics, a lot of the research that we find has generated this loneliness epidemic. You've heard the US Surgeon General talk about this. The idea that loneliness is at the highest levels that we've ever seen. And then alongside of that, your kids have perhaps, if they're on social, they've experienced perhaps a level of the comparison or even the bullying that comes from accessing these kinds of things and a number of the different social platforms. And then kind of this idea of even reduced empathy, the polarization that we're seeing in our world today seems to be lended or aided by the ability to be online and to not have to look somebody in the eye, but you can just call them whatever you want to call them because they're just an avatar, they're just a username, they're just a random set of letters online in your feed. And then the rise of AI, there's lots of things that are challenging about it, but one of the things that I would love for us to highlight, and this might be at the end when we get a chance to chat a bit, but it's this interesting process or problem of dehumanization that as AI takes off, we're going to struggle to articulate what it really and truly means to be human and what it means to be in relationship with people and what we are actually meant to do as human beings and people. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'd love to show you because it's a little terrifying. Okay, so if these are some of the challenges, the great news is I want to offer some solutions to them. And as we wade into these kinds of things, we have to realize that this is now very much compounded into the lives of our kids, and it's coming at them pretty fast. So I showed this video last night, but for anybody that hasn't seen it, this is a true advertisement. This is something that actually existed in Southeast Asia a number of years ago. And then I think they sold the tech to this popular gaming company called Razer. But all of this kind of gets squished together into products like this one that, again, will be available and people will be accessing. And can you imagine what this means?
Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. Morning, Joey. You were snoring again. Definitely wear your favorite green jacket. Look, now we're really vibing. Have a good day.
Hey, cutie.
Hi, Amanda. Great brainstorming last night.
Actually, I need more.
What if we flip the design here? Do you think it can work?
Nice. I think you're onto something.
Hold A, soldier. We need more air support.
Yeah.
Whoa, clean shot. Nice one.
Oof. Maybe aim for the head next time? Break line of sight.
Switch to burst fire mid-range.
GG, that was amazing. Ready to go again? This is Project Ava, your AI desk companion. Do you think they know we're actually calling the shots?
Nope, let's keep it that way.
And what ends as like a tag on the end, maybe trying to be funny, is actually a terrifying reminder of the strength of these tools that are coming at us and coming at our kids. So these are the things that we're dealing with. These are some of the issues that we've got. And so my question is for you, and maybe let's do it this way. If you want to talk with the person next to you, what else are you seeing as it pertains to screens and technology that perhaps you're concerned about or that you see as like a potential issue? And then we'll kind of share what we're talking about. But go for 2 minutes, just the person next to you. What else are you seeing that kind of is a little bit challenging or perhaps is an issue for us these days? Go for it. Yeah. The fragmented attention is really interesting. You maybe have heard that they're talking like Netflix, which is obviously creating lots of content, that they're having to put dialogue explaining what's going on into the shows because they're assuming that as people are watching the shows, they're not actually looking at them. you know what I mean? They're doing something else.
I've actually heard that there's people are making shows less entertaining because people can't watch TV and look at their phones at the same time if they're wrapped into what's on the TV.
Right. Yeah. It's a complete shift, and it's interesting if you watched that kind of divided attention. The way that and it's not to say that this is the be all end all, but the way that TV was made, you know, the shows like Parks and Recreation, you know, a recent show, and the fast dialogue. What's the one with Lauren Graham, the Gilmore Girls? You know, the dialogue, right? Like quick. And then you go back to, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you go to like a Seinfeld, and you're like, oh, if you watch it now, it just is a little bit slower paced, even though there's stuff happening. And then you go all the way back to something like Little House on the Prairie. If you ever want to try something wild, is watch Little House on the Prairie, and you're like, why is this moving? Like this pace, like it's molasses. It's so slow. And the recognizing of like how things have sped up in order to deal with the fragmentation of our attention. So it's not pushing us in a healthy place, that's for sure. And although we, unless you work for a movie studio, may not be able to solve those types of things, it's helpful to note what it ends up doing to our brain beyond just the fact that we can't watch a full TV show. Yeah. What else are you guys seeing over here?
Missing out on real life.
Yeah. Yeah, and even transplanting, assuming real life is everything that is right here in front of me. Like, I'm not missing out. Did you not see what, like, I got level 11 on my Clash of Clans. Like, this is incredible, but I had to wake up at 3 a.m. for it. Like this separation of things for sure. Yeah, that's a good one. What else are you guys seeing?
The message, the way that there's communication going on now, it can be so Discord or all these other message boards, and the way that they can just instantaneously communicate to people.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure that those people are actually friends from school because they all have different funny names.
Yeah.
Versus someone else that's been brought in by someone else who doesn't have any parental oversight.
Yeah.
And now that person's in and you have no idea who they are.
100%. Yeah, there's an interesting thing that we were sold, especially with the advent of social networks, the ability to connect with people. Like, so this is a beautiful, wonderful thing, and in some ways, it's kind of nice, and yet it kind of creates these very, and I'll mention this a little bit later, but like very monocultured communities. It's like, hey, you want to talk to somebody that loves German polka music? Like, you can. But if you're only talking to the people that love that same German polka music, you miss out on the opportunity of interacting with real people that might be quite different than you. And so for our kids, it's like, yeah, this is my crew that I play, Halo with, but like, do you know how to talk to people that don't like that? Do you know what I mean? And so the connection has some of those kind of downsides that we're seeing. For us too, as adults, like, and we'll get into what the feed and the algorithm does, that you end up just experiencing life through a particular lens that's meant to drive you deeper into the app. And so you miss out on some of that broadening of the human experience. People from back here, anybody want to jump in? What else are you seeing?
Just the addiction to the dopamines, when you take the screen away, they go through that withdrawal and sometimes throw a fit.
Yeah.
Emotional fallout.
Sometimes, yes. We're working on it not being all the time. We'd be happy with sometimes, but yeah. Yeah, there is the way that things are created. Like there's a chemical reaction to it. It's designed to give you, and like, hey, I don't know about you, but I've played a few, Angry Bird times on my phone too. And so I experience it, you've experienced it, and it does something if that's where you're used to finding kind of enjoyment or peace, and it's in that cheap kind of quick hits of the dopamine. Yeah, there's a lot going on. And so when we think about all these kinds of things, I want to offer kind of a way forward for us just in this conversation. We're not solving everything. We can't fix everything. But if I can kind of steer our conversation around 3 particular things, we might be able to walk out learning from each other. That would be great too. There's wisdom in this room. You've got an idea or something you've tried that could potentially work for somebody else here as well. And so we love those kinds of sharing of ideas, and that it will kind of steer our direction to maybe help our kids just a little bit more. When we think about the screens, the internet, the smartphones, the artificial intelligence, I'd want to suggest that perhaps handling 3 areas, the first being discernment, and actually learning what it means to teach and to walk our kids through this really important skill. Discernment is something that isn't necessarily clear and obvious to people, and it's not even clear and obvious for adults. But if we can give our kids a good sense of discernment, the great news is that as things shift and change, the same skills that they were able to apply to their current realities will benefit them in the realities later on down the line. So, for example, this is a funny one. I'm not saying that this is the rule you need to put in your house, but I grew up not allowed to watch The Simpsons. I've never seen an episode to this day. At this point, I'm old enough to watch The Simpsons. But I do remember my mom having particular reasons for why she didn't want me to watch The Simpsons. And whether or not The Simpsons would have been fine for me to watch or not didn't change the fact that she was trying to instill and teach me something about discernment, about what I would witness or watch. And that lesson is something that I've carried through into my adult years, and having a discernment for things has served me well over the years. So whether or not again, I can watch The Simpsons now, although for some reason I haven't. Maybe there's a little bit of like guilt or shame or something that I got to sort out. But the point is that the skill sets that we can offer to our kids that can transfer beyond just the immediate, hey, I want to play the tablet. No, it's not time yet for the tablet time. That's what we want to get to. So the discernment's a really key thing. It's going to help with a lot of these kinds of challenges and issues, the fragmented attention, dangerous exposure, infobesity. Discernment will kind of help us and help our kids kind of push through there. Some of the things that we see around comparison and bullying and empathy and loneliness, I want to make a suggestion, and I have some ideas on practical ways that this could live out, but I want to suggest that from even a Christian standpoint, the invitation that we have to community, in particular spiritual community, and even more specifically, spiritual family, is actually a beautiful antidote to some of these challenges. And if we can think of this as not just something that we have to do, but something that we actually can get to do and enjoy doing, but need to prioritize in particular ways, that our kids can actually find their way through some of the challenges of social and smartphone days these days. AI is complicated because it's a little bit of a Wild West and we're not sure exactly how it's all going to land, but dehumanization is a pretty big challenge, and at least one principle that I think is worth holding on to, especially as people of faith, is that if we can understand the adventure that God's calling us into is really and truly a grand adventure, that anything that falls short of that is actually less interesting. And if we could find a way to help our kids understand and see, if we would experience it as such even, that this thing that God is inviting us into, about being the people of God, about bringing the blessing of God to the nations around us, that this is actually a wild, cool thing to experience, that they might actually lean into it and can be protective as the things of AI. There's going to be great things with AI, but as some of the dangers of it can kind of come crashing in around us. So I want to walk us through some ideas on discernment, community, and adventure. And again, we'll get into some hyper-practical things. But when it comes to discernment, if we can start there, this is something that is, again, as people of faith, is actually really clear in the scriptures. We find lots of examples of what discernment and what we're called to as a means of people that can experience this kind of thing. Discernment meaning that is, Paul writes to the Philippians, brothers and sisters, whatever is true and whatever is knowable and whatever is right and whatever is pure and whatever is lovely and whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So when we think about these types of things and layer this over top of our experience, discernment is the invitation to say, okay, if the scriptures are true, can we allow this call, this invitation to think and experience life in these kinds of categories? Where do I experience not these things as a part of my interaction with screens or my device or what I watch or what I see? Discernment is saying, okay, whatever is true and noble and right, that becomes the standard for evaluating what we walk into and experience. And again, this is something that we have to, as parents, take on and shoulder and say this is something that we care about. And then we model and show our kids what it's like to have discernment around the things that we watch, the things that we play on our phones, the ways that we interact with our technology. So although the writer of Philippians isn't thinking about what apps you download onto your phone, the beautiful thing is that this is actually pretty strong in terms of its ability to kind of cut through and just ask yourself, hey, as I open this device, or as my kids, if they're wanting to watch this kind of show, can it fit through the lens of Paul writing to the church in Philippi Is this something that's right and lovely and admirable? To the church in Ephesus, imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. Ephesians goes on, let there be no immorality, sexual immorality, impurity, or greed among you. And so what challenges me is, and I've actually had some conversations of accountability with some of my friends, because my kids on their Amazon tablets can access videos now. My son that's 10, can watch videos of Mr. Beast, of course, very, very popular YouTuber. And Mr. Beast hosts these challenges of, trying to win money and that sort of thing. And we're wrestling with this idea of like, what does it mean to celebrate the kind of chasing after resources and money in those kinds of games? And I don't have a good answer on this one, but what I know is that this kind of scripture makes me stop and think for a second. What am I teaching my son, and what am I catechizing him into when he's experiencing and watching these kinds of things? And again, I'm not making a judgment against it because he still watches them, but I'm just pausing and I'm like, no sexual immorality, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're pretty strong on that. Impurity, not exactly sure what that means, but that's, whatever. But greed, there's a lot to that I just want to process as a parent. Such sins have no place among God's people. Obscene stories, foolish talk, and coarse jokes, these are not for you. Now, I've already given my mom a shout out, so I'll just give her a second one here. When I grew up in church, and so in lots of ways I was this beautiful beneficiary of good Christian community. But I can remember being in grade 9 or 10, and our church, it's a little bit of a larger church on the East Coast, and there's a Christian school there that meets in the building at the same time. And I can remember, my kids actually go to this Christian school now, and so I can remember as a grade 10 student at youth group, at our small group time, not paying attention, whatever. But then writing and making, those little games, those kinds of things. With my buddy Mark. Mark ended up in my wedding. We're raising kids together now, and we're still trying to figure things out. But Mark and I wrote this, and it wasn't obscene, but it wasn't really appropriate. This kind of thing, and we made a few inappropriate jokes about some of our friends and people in it. Well, anyways, we make that, and I don't think anything of it. Turns out I leave it in this grade 2 classroom that we were meeting in. And the next day, this is, God bless, Christian community and people that know each other, the grade 2s end up in there, and a grade 2 kid picks up and knows enough to read and to play with this and to open it up and hand it to their teacher and hands it to the principal. Principal talks to the youth pastor, they know the group in there, and somehow it happens so fast. I don't know how this goes, but my mom ends up with this thing, and I get home from school that day, and she's like, hey, you want to play a game? I'm like, whoa, where did you find that? This is terrifying. And then she brings me to this passage, because here we go. Obscene stories, foolish talk, and coarse jokes, these are not for you, and they weren't for me, and neither was a few of the other privileges I had as a grade 10 student for a few days as I got grounded. But the point is that we let these scriptures speak over us and into our lives, and we allow them to shape us. This is what we're called to. And so we try to sort out, okay, what does that mean for us in today? Because 2,000 years ago, I don't know what obscene stories meant, but I know what they mean now. And I know when I access and I'm a part of my, my routine on my device and the podcast that I listen to, I know what this means. Like if you use this as a lens and you're like, hey, is that podcast you're listening to, are they telling obscene stories, and is it foolish talk and coarse jokes? I can say yes or no. It's easy to be there. But for me, the question is, can I take this scripture, apply it to my life, and then as I'm raising my kids, model and show what it means to let this shape not just my life, but their life as well? And that it's something that we do together as a family, because this is who we are. So it's a bit of a shift from just, we're obviously bringing rules and guidelines and direction and boundaries for our kids, but we're also trying to do it through the lens of the scriptures, and we're trying to do it as people that do it as brothers and sisters in Christ with our kids. You know what I mean? Like this is both for both of us. Instead, let there be thankfulness to God. For once you were full of darkness, but now you have light from the Lord, so live as people of the light, for this light within you produces only what is good, right, and true. And so discernment becomes, okay, can we take and layer these scriptures and apply them to the ways that we interact with our devices, the apps, the things that we watch, the things that the games that we play, and that sort of thing. The most helpful tool that I've seen on discernment and trying to just give you an idea of how you can kind of quickly apply this with your family, with your kids, and even with yourself. Jeremiah's got a few of these printed out in his office. So I think the first 4 people to his office after this can get a paper copy of this. But it's from our friend Walt Mueller. He runs the Center CP for Parent and Youth Understanding. I think it's cpyu.org. But just Google that first in case that's a bad website, but you'll figure it out. But he puts together this 3D approach to discernment. And the way that Walt's been writing, and he's written books on youth culture for many decades, the way that he talks about discernment is to do it through the lens of 3Ds. You discover, and then you discern, and then you decide what to do with it. And so this is too much text. We're not going to read all of this. But the point is that he invites, with whatever media, app, website, podcast, anything, to discover something is to ask questions about what it is. What's the main topic or the theme of this? What's it intended to make the listeners or the viewers feel or the players feel? What does this piece make any overt or covert suggestions on how to think, talk, or live? This is the act of discovering something. Just tons of questions. Who or what is glorified in this? Is it hopeful or is it hopeless? And you're not making a judgment in this moment, but discernment is about teaching our kids what it means to actually discover what's a part of our media or on our devices. The way that I play this as a youth pastor is I used to have a rule whenever we'd travel somewhere for an event or a retreat or something. I'd say to the kids when they get in, hey, we can listen to any music you want. Anything. At this point, it'd be Spotify. Back then, it was like bring a CD or a radio. But we'll listen to anything you want. And they're like, what, really? I'm like, yes, anything at all, any song. And they're like, oh, this is incredible. I'm like, connect your device. They connect their device and they'd play something. And whatever it is, like Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl. And so they're like, are we allowed to listen to this in the car? And we get to the end of it and I turn it off and be like, all right, now we're going to play a game and we're going to discover what it says. Let's just talk about it for a few minutes. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. What was the song about? And they're like, this isn't what we thought it would be. But the point was that they would talk out loud. What is this song actually speaking about? What do we hear in the lyrics? What is the artist trying to convey to us? What is going on? This discovery process is meant to make our students and make our kids pause for a moment and just think about what they're experiencing. So you watch a movie with your kids and then you talk about it. Let's not just be mindless consumers of something, but let's have a conversation about it. And so if we start to model that kind of work, it helps them become more critical of the things that they're experiencing and watching, and it helps, hopefully, to carry through for their life even afterwards. So discovering is about asking the questions of the app, of the media piece. You can do this ahead of time, because there's certainly times that you don't want to actually stumble through something. So for me personally, honestly, we use a website called Plugged In. Plugged In is a Focus on the Family resource, and they just do content surveys of movies, TV shows on Netflix. Common Sense Media has a bit of it too. But the point is that when I do this kind of work of what is going on inside of a media piece, there's sometimes when I'm like, I'm just not old enough to be able to watch it. It's sometimes the language I'll use, with my kids or with somebody else. But the point is that there's just some things that we're not meant to consume. It's not actually helpful. And there's certainly are pieces of content that, although I'm legally allowed to partake in or to consume, it's not actually really helpful. It doesn't fulfill that scripture of producing only what is good and right and true. And so for that reason, discernment becomes something that we teach and that we showcase. So discover, ask some questions, and then afterwards you get into this discernment phase. And it's fun and interesting to ask questions of your kids or the people that you're with. I sometimes frame it as, would you allow? So I'm trying to think of a good example of this, but I had some. This is students. My kids are 10. You kind of saw 8 and 6, so they're a little bit young for this kind of stuff. But because I work with students, Game of Thrones when it's big. And so there's these kids watching Game of Thrones. Now, I'm not old enough to watch Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones has got too many, nudity scenes, as what Plugged In says. And so I'm like, if you're watching it as a grade 12 guy, let me ask the question, how you think it's okay for you? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, what about my 10-year-old son? Do you think he would be allowed to watch this show, or should he be allowed to watch this show? And they're like, no, probably not. I'm like, okay, tell me why. Because now we're into this fun, interesting part where you're discerning, okay, what do you actually think about content? What do you think about what these things are experiencing, and why should some people be able to watch it and some people not? And you get a chance to see how a 17-year-old kind of starts to process some type of decision around what they themselves would consume or what a younger student might consume. And you start to see kind of their morality come to play and come to fruition, and then you can kind of talk about it and tease it out. And so with your kids, same kind of thing. You get a chance to like, okay, we know what this is about. Should we as a family, should this be a show that we watch? Should this be a show that we keep watching? Should this be an app that we continue to use? And that discernment process, is a part of this second stage. And then finally, discernment is connecting those dots, and then finally is deciding, should this actually be something that we tackle and use? And it's this idea of we use our heads to guard our hearts. And Walt writes thoughtfully about being a mindful critique of the things that are around us. So that's the idea of discernment. Last night I shared this idea of helping our students process their emotions and not just prohibiting some emotions and protecting. What I missed in that is that sometimes with our kids we do try to protect them from things. That's the right thing. And sometimes we do prohibit them from having kind of emotional outbursts of that can be dangerous for the people around them. And so I just wanted to say that because as I was preparing for tonight, I'm like, oh yeah, like sometimes we actually do really prohibit things, and sometimes we are meant to, of course, protect them from things. That's the right thing. But for our kids, there is this sense that someday we're not going to be there to protect them, and we're not going to be there to prohibit their use of their device. Like screen time in my household, I'm in control of, absolutely. If you have the password to the Wi-Fi router, you can turn off the Wi-Fi in your home. But when your kid has a cell phone plan and a data plan, and when they move out, they've got access to everything and anything. And so at some point, you know that the protection and the prohibiting is going to be over, and it's at that point that you'll be left, or they'll be left, with simply the discernment that we've been able to instill in them and brought them up with. So the hope is that we could actually offer the path thoughtfully, offer some guardrails, and that over time, as those guardrails come down, that they're prepared and well suited for the path, if that makes sense. So let me pause there for a second, because I'm going to offer some ideas on the path and how you can build walls and what that could look like. But before we go further, let's just pause for a moment on discernment. Does that make sense? Is that okay? You can push back. You can challenge. Again, if you're here last night, you can make a claim of heresy here. That's no problem. The point is that let this be a conversation, because I could have something really off base here, and that's okay. But you have to say it. Off base? Can you see some of the ways that discernment has played into even your own journey, where it's like, oh yeah, that's of course why, like my conscience dings when this kind of thing happens. Like I've got that kind of baked into how I make decisions, and you can kind of see how you're trying to raise your kids up in that way. Would that make sense?
I think it's pretty important, because I feel like if we try and, I mean, for me as a parent, how I think about how my kids access media or the relationship with media, it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, initially it was about the prohibit and protect.
Yeah.
And you absolutely cannot prohibit and protect against everything.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you get into that, like, this is my job.
Yeah.
It's not manageable.
Right.
And at some point, like, this transition to bringing our kids alongside in that discernment piece has been really, has been transformative.
Yeah.
I think in just the load that we carry as parents, but also just in the partnership with our kids.
Yeah.
That we're not just there to police you and to prohibit you from all these things.
Right.
What's your agency here, and how do you view what's happening?
Yeah.
So I think that discernment piece is huge.
And we know it intuitively when we think about it. For pause for a second. We do it in other areas, like when they're 2, you brush their teeth for them, and then you hope that by the time they're 6 or 7 or 8, that they'll brush their teeth on their own, and you still have to check it because, man, we've spent a lot of dentists. But the point is that it's something that you give them as a skill for the rest of their life. Our kids have a lot of cavities, and it's usually our fault, I guess, because we haven't brushed their teeth well enough. I don't know. We're sorting it out. But the point is that the discernment becomes the same type of thing. You're offering this beautiful skill, and if you're able to recognize that. So my favorite example, although it's a terrifying one, of like protect and prohibit is what you do when they're young, right? Like you get that opportunity. They're 3, they're 4. You prohibit and protect them from all sorts of things. My son started being able to read Archer, our middle one, and he was, so he's almost 8 now. He was probably like 6, and he was reading kind of early and sounding words out. My wife's a teacher, so she teaches them like proper phonetics, which I don't understand. I'm like, is that how you learn? And they're like, that's how it's supposed to go. So so they're learning and sounding words out really well. I'm thinking we're protecting and prohibiting all sorts of things. My 6-year-old, we go to the park, and somebody's spray painted at the park, F-U-C-K. You can see where this is going. And so my son is like, legitimately just like, listen, I can't say it because, again, grew up in the church and it's shame and embarrassment, but like, it says the F word right out loud. And I'm like, oh no, we don't do that. And he's like, why? It's written right there. I'm like, yes. He's like, is that how it sounds? I'm like, yes, also yes. He said, well, what's wrong with it? What does it mean? And I'm like, it's 6 years old. So it's like, it's complicated. There's a lot of variants of like range of meaning on that word, but none of them are good, and don't say it out loud. Why not? I'm like, this is a lot going on. But so you protect and you prohibit, and yet you get to this point where you're like, but I also have to teach you that sometimes there's some things that you're going to trust, like, hey, you need to walk away from this. You need to stay away from this. And I have your best interest at heart, and you're trying to convince them in some ways, and you're putting some rules in place, and hopefully as they get older, you can give them the reasoning and the understanding so that as you go, this discernment that they're picking up is something that they'll carry with them. We'll go into some specifics. The tools that you have here, these handouts, they're not written by me, although I wish they were. They're really, really great. But they're one of the resources that I'd love to highlight for you. You've seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, but the Center for Humane Technology is this wildly helpful organization. They're not faith-based, but they recognize the challenges that our media is presenting to us, and they try to help us walk through what it means to be discerning in the midst of these billion-dollar industries chasing down our brain and attention. And so the 3 that you've got are just going to give you tons of questions and ideas and resource on helping build a little bit of discernment with your people, no matter what their age is. You can start this, as young as 6 or 7. You kind of 7 or 8, and then you still use it even as they're 17, 18-year-olds. It provides fascinating conversation. I'm at this conference in Atlanta a couple years ago, and one of their team members was presenting, and he talks about being one of the engineers at. He might actually not have worked on a social media platform, but I think he was working at Google. And then he was talking because all of his friends in Silicon Valley were working on these apps. And he's like, listen, like it's legitimately billions of dollars of research going into how can they keep you connected to that app. And so he says it was a mind-blowing thing when Facebook came up with the notification. And at this point, we just assume notifications are part of life and a part of the experience. But like there was a time when notifications weren't a thing in our life. And the way he describes it, and I had never seen it before, so maybe this will be as earth-shattering to you as it was to me. He's like, can you imagine if I told you that somebody has posted information about you and maybe even a photo of you on the internet? Do you want to see it? It's like, yeah, I want to see it. I want to know what they're saying. And he's like, that's the notification. And then over time, they realized we can make this even more salacious. And when Instagram and Snapchat especially came up with the disappearing stuff. And so then they were able to say, hey, somebody's posted something about you, they're talking about you online. They've even posted a picture of you online. And if you don't look at it in the next 24 hours, you'll never know what they said. Do you want to take a look? It's like, yeah, I want to take a look. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, they're taking this research on how to convince people to be drawn in, and then they're shooting it straight at us and our kids in really, really, really specific kinds of ways. And so as parents, we start with, when they're young, the opportunity to kind of have high control. And so this might sound familiar, but it's the kinds of things where around our technology and around our screens that we aim at having very, very clearly supervised, screen time with our kids. The hope is that we would, for any of our kids that get a chance to experience it, these are usually the younger years, maybe elementary, but that if they have screens, that what they're experiencing or what they're watching. And if you've ever sat through it, like there's some things that it's actually not bad. Bluey's pretty decent. It's a little bit mind-numbing if you get into, some of the like the Baby Genius stuff on YouTube or whatever that. But there's some things that's kind of interesting. But it has to be supervised because you want the control. You want to know what they're experiencing. You want to know what they're seeing. The goal in the early days is to be that protective and that prohibitive, to restrict the devices that they get. We're not just handing a 6-year-old like a wide open iPhone with the ability to do anything and everything on it. We're restricting of the devices, and there's strict boundaries around usage. And so the hope is that you would set rules and boundaries for your kids and for your family, and you can kind of control it because you're in control. And in those early days, it's that screens are primarily content for your kids. It's primarily that they're consuming things. It's not quite yet social, but that they're experiencing those types of things. And there's rules to put in place, and we can offer some thoughts on that. But the goal here is to hold that high control. And there's this movement I want to show you about wait till 8th, this idea of waiting until phones for your kids until the end of 8th grade. It's this really fun movement. It started out of in the States. Jonathan Haidt's talked a lot about it, the guy that wrote Anxious Generation. And actually, I think it's this one, yeah. And it's this understanding of like, hey, you have as much control as you possibly can. When you offer the smartphone, it's going to open up. It's going to change the nature of our devices and your kids' devices. And so when you move into that space with smartphones or with social access, let's hold that off until at least the end of 8th grade. And we're starting to see schools even in different countries. We're seeing, I think it's Australia, that just kind of banned social media access below a certain age. And so people are recognizing the dangers of kind of the unfettered access. But what this has been really brilliant for is that when kids end up at the device age, there really and truly is a social part to it. And so in order for this to work, it has to be a group of parents that band together and say, hey, we're going to operate differently as a community so that our kids aren't necessarily missing out on the socialization that comes with being a kid. And this is just the nature. And if you're already past this stage, sorry, we'll just take a moment through it. But like, if you remember when my kid came, my 10-year-old is in grade 5, and he said, the first kid got a phone in my class. And like, that's the first domino. Like, it's going to get crazier, right? And we're like, oh, it's easy to say no. There's only one kid. Who are you going to text? You can't text that one kid. But like over time, it's like, well, now when half of them have their phones, and then when all of them have a phone except for the one kid, all of a sudden, and what we discover is that the socialization of our young people is tied up to being able to access these devices, to send the instant message, to be a part of the group on not Facebook anymore, but whatever platform they're using, if they're posting on Discord or if they're Snapchatting each other and that sort of thing. And so the pledge, wait until 8th, is not just to say, hey, we should hold off until after 8th grade before our kids get their own devices of this kind of way, but also that parents need to work together in community with each other so that it normalizes it for the kids. Hey, we're united in there. It's no longer that the rest of your friends have it. It's that, no, we've committed as parents that this is what we're holding off for. There's cool opportunities depending on how close you are with your kids' friends and their community. We're fortunate in our church, the same friends that I grew up with, there's a number of them that are kicking around and we're raising kids together. And so you can create some of those mile markers together if your kids are actually friends with one another and you know those families. And this is one of those things that when the time comes, perhaps you can do that as a team and as a group of families together. There's lots of resources on this kind of stuff. So when you get into like, okay, how do you actually pull this kind of stuff off? ScreenSense has got a number of great tools for parents. You can kind of see along the top for school as well. trying to give those help sheets to understand, okay, how do we actually instill our kids and how do we give them the right tools around these kinds of things? Wait Till 8th has a few ideas as well, but they're mostly the kind of that pledge. And then as parents, you pull these things together and start to piece together what's going to be helpful for you and your family. I want to shift and keep talking about this, like when you have the high control, I think that's really, really important, but you also have to recognize that your kid's going to wander on the playground and they're going to see F-U-C-K written on something. And for that reason, we are still starting with our youngest kids the act of teaching discernment and at least teaching to recognize when things aren't how they're supposed to be. And so another great resource that I would highly recommend is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Nod your head if you've seen this book before. There's a few people, okay. So this one is about porn-proofing today's young kids. And so this is like kind of like 5, 6 and younger. This is kind of working through until like, 9 or 10. But what it does is it just gives you language. I think for us as parents, sometimes it's like, man, how do you get into the conversation? I've been we try not to do the sex talk in my house, but we try to do like the sex conversations so that we just keep talking about it. And I mean, like I do this kind of as my job. I've done, sex talks for youth groups for many, many years, and I'm getting into this conversation, a fresh and new one with my son. I'm like, this is a little bit complicated. Like there's a lot to cover here, and there's a lot of questions, and I was like, I wasn't ready for that. And so when you can have resources that give you language as you're wanting to teach right from the very earliest of days, the kind of discernment and the kind of openness that we talk in our home openly about anything and everything, so that our kids aren't experiencing any kind of shame or embarrassment of these conversations because they're just used to having it right from the very start. That's kind of the hope and the dream. So we talk about good pictures and bad pictures. We talk about eventually what pornography actually is, because I know that the age of exposure for young people, it keeps getting younger and younger and younger. And although currently I believe my son hasn't been exposed, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, while he's 9, 10, 11, or 12. Like it's honestly, the stats are pretty clear. He's likely going to be exposed to pornography at one of those younger ages. And we know from our research that left unaddressed, this is also something that grips young people, young men and young women at those younger ages. And so to give language and to try to demystify and also make it not shameful to have that as a conversation is a part of building the kind of discernment so that they recognize when things not ideal, when things are wrong, when they're experiencing something that they're not supposed to experience. What's this next one? Oh, that's back to those guys. Thoughts or questions on this? Because this is actually, I know we're not going to totally breeze by this. We'll come back to it a bit, but thoughts or ideas or challenges on this kind of stuff so far and some of these resources? Other things that maybe you've seen that have been helpful? Yeah.
They're young, so I'm not there yet. But like I've always wondered about like having like sex talks or talks about pornography like at younger ages.
Yep.
Does that like make them curious or make them want to go find out look for it kind of like?
Yeah, good question. So with the upside to these kinds of resources is that it's put together by people who are experts in this particular area. So I'm not an expert, but when you get into, and I would just say it's worth grabbing the junior. How old are your kids?
They're like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so like 5's a good age. Absolutely, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. And what it's going to offer for you is again language, not to. It doesn't present it as like, hey, there's some bad pictures and you can't see them. But instead it's trying to offer, because then, yeah, they're like, where are they? Like, are they in the house? Like, why are you telling me? So I can, but it's true, it's understandable, like, depending on how we set this up, it can become like, yeah, salacious or interesting or like, I'm curious about it. But the way that these books in particular and the way that we try to teach on discernment is just that these types of things are going to happen. You're going to see from here, it's proper naming of body parts. It's talking about what's appropriate, what's not. This is why you're not allowed to run around without your underwear on in the grocery store. Like, it's those kinds of things that are just trying to build up the understanding, but also give language so that our kids are more comfortable to talk about it. And then it's an ongoing conversation as well. So that, again, the hope is that the demystification of it is not that they're going to look for it, but that eventually when they see it, that they understand and know what they're experiencing and seeing, and that they think it's okay to actually tell their parents. Yeah. I'm trying to think of stories that I should share on that, but maybe I shouldn't. So it's a change perhaps, but for any, and it can be uncomfortable. So I'll be honest on this too. Like, it can be uncomfortable as parents to navigate this as a conversation with our kids, and depending on where you're at in your kids' development, how old they are, how young they are, it's always worth starting to talk about it, and to aim at conversation and not just the talk, if that makes sense. It's part of the discernment. It's part of like, hey, we're protecting, but at the same time, there's going to be a day when they're going to have unfettered access to stuff. And when they do, how much have we been the ones to tell them about these things ahead of time? I always want to, like, the goal, and this is, sometimes how we say it, your kids are going to find out and they're going to hear about all sorts of things. I would love for the first conversations to have been from us as a family. So we get to communicate what we believe in, our values and our hopes for them, so that they know. The things that we think are true. It's a good question, though. Other questions or thoughts? Yeah.
Well, just wrestling with the, the paradigm of protecting and prohibiting and all that. How would you fall on the, let's say, software-based protection against them accessing content or sites or that sort of thing, like just completely blocking things, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's very, very wise. And I'm trying to remember it because I had it in here at one point, but if that comes up later. Yeah. Oh, maybe not. Shoot. But yes, there are lots of great resources. If you go back to ScreenSense, they're going to offer some solutions. You have to watch for what works in Canada versus the US. But yes, blocking, absolutely. Any kind of things that with your router, filters that kind of filter things out. There's actually one positive use of AI these days is there's some AI softwares that will actually pre-screen the things that your kids are seeing on their devices and can block them as they're seeing it. And so all of those kinds of things are right and good, and we should be doing them absolutely. At the same time, they're not going to be perfect, and that isn't going to be, we still do discernment at the same time. So like both end at the same time. Protective and let's keep those images and whatnot from our houses as much as possible. And at the same time, discernment as much as we can. If that makes sense. Yeah, so resources off of this site will be really valuable. And then, there's a couple other things that will be helpful in that regard here in just a second. Or do you have tools, though, that you use that are helpful?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you know what a Raspberry Pi is.
Yes, that's getting complicated, though. Yeah, go for it. Keep going.
So I've moved beyond that, so that's good. But I ran a Pi-hole for a while with a recursive DNS server and all that stuff. TELUS made it so much easier, so I can actually just pause devices. Last night I just saw Liam was on YouTube Shorts for too long, and I just blocked it and turned it off. So it's really simple. I don't know if Rogers does the same thing, but.
Yeah, and that's a good question. So you can also buy different routers that connect into your Rogers or to your TELUS. That gives you the ability to control those kinds of things. So I should have put this on here. I apologize. Mine is Deco, or I think it's a TP-Link is the company. But without a doubt, conversation right over here, this is the person to talk to. And what you'll find is that there are resources so that your internet becomes, when you're at your house and your kids are connected to your Wi-Fi, that there are sites and things that they can't access. That's a good thing and worth putting in place early for sure. Yeah.
I don't like it when we're watching sports and the commercials that come online.
Yep.
We're watching with our grandchildren.
Yes.
And it's like, I would like when I used to do presentations, I'd like a picture of you, like a black screen or something. They're not appropriate.
It's wild. And it's actually one of, so again, I'm trying to think of, so there are family members that we have to make sure they're very, very, very clear. If you're going to watch something with our kids, our rule is, unless it's clearly like a show that we've approved, if you're going to just open YouTube and watch even kids things on YouTube, you got to sit there with them, because it's going to flip to an ad, and it's going to be an ad for something that is exactly as you say. And so we're very cognizant of that and cautious of that. And it will catch you off guard, right? Like, because you're not thinking, it's like, oh, they're just watching Baby Einstein. And then all of a sudden, and this is probably the wrong example, but they're watching a Mr. Beast video. And then all of a sudden, the ad is like clearly for something scary or inappropriate. And so absolutely worth protecting. Also worth continuing the discernment process so that her own kids kind of recognize like, oh, this isn't right. Even though they're with somebody that they might trust, that person may not have the same understanding of how that technology works. Or
My reaction, what do I do with it? Do I quickly change the channel, or don't look at this, or, like that whole varying ages of kids.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll offer an idea, but then I'd love to throw to the room too, because would be my thought on it. So you're watching something, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's not helpful. So yeah, absolutely worth like, hey, let's shut that down and let's get rid of it. I would also then follow it up with a conversation of why, or like, hey, you just saw me shut that down. Do you know why that was? Or do you know what you just saw? Let's just talk about it for a minute. And it gives an opportunity to even teach the discernment process of, hey, you're going to run into things, or, and for my wife and I, like, we'll start a show and we'll realize, oh, this isn't what we want to watch. And so we stop that show, and that's okay. And the same kind of thing with ads, or the same kind of thing with, or the hockey game.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Things that we're watching with the kids.
Yep. Yeah. So you turn it off with a commercial, or you step in front of the TV if it's like, whoa, this is crazy. But have the conversation so that they understand and they know what's going on, because those are the things that will stick with them. Is like, man, you take that pretty seriously. Why is that? Well, it's because, and you get a chance to kind of walk them through it.
And she's actually talking about watching Maple Leafs games.
Yeah, just the Leafs. If you could just block the Leafs the whole time. But that's an idea, because again, here's the example. You're like you said, you're just watching something that's the hockey game, and it's going to come up, and you're like, man, could I not get through just a few moments? And yet, the beautiful thing is that it gives us a teaching opportunity, which is also not wrong. Not that you seek out for it. But other thoughts or ideas on that? I mean, there's like, I guess you go as far as like pausing and fast forwarding live TV if you're looking to like fully avoid it. But that's a little bit wonky. Yeah, go for it.
We reference a lot of the stuff like the FU written on the side of the wall, or the language that might pop up in a show.
Yeah.
Well, you don't say that. Why would you say that? You're right. These are things you're going to hear.
Yeah.
These are things we don't say.
Yes.
We don't say that because that guy's smoking. Okay.
Yeah.
That's his choice. Our choice as a family is that that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to do that to our body. Why? Because it's a temple or blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Even when we go downtown Vancouver, there's an opportunity to share a whole lot of them like that. Why are they like that? Well, this is what happens when you're doing with drugs. And it's you're giving them those little tiny nuggets of these little stepping stones for them to recognize what it is. But you're also moving somewhere. You're also at the park. You're also able to walk away from it. You're also able to navigate it. It is more difficult if it's on your TV and you're jumping, doing jumping jacks in front of the game or whatever. But we'll even point that out. Like, hey guys, see this? This is why we make choices. Like, why our choices are important.
Yeah.
And we've already had questions about that come back to us from that.
Yeah.
Why is that guy doing that, Dad? I thought this was happening.
Yeah.
Great, you're seeing it. Yep. Keep going. Carry on.
Yeah, that's a good word. Maybe else
even
want to
the
jump in?
little or the smaller pieces along the way versus something that's.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's hard to do if it's so frequent, but I mean, if it's just like one big thing to address, going back to the 3Ds and the discernment, and you can go through those steps at that point. You know, okay, why is this a problem? And go through the content part and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's catching those little teaching moments that are I think are actually pretty helpful for those kinds of things. And you know, it's again not wrong to do whatever we can to prohibit and to protect our kids, absolutely. And then to be non-anxious, that's maybe another word I would just add into the mix. Not anxious about things that show up in their world that are clearly something we disagree with or we're not interested in. But we're not anxious about it because we're, of course, anticipating that the world is full of all sorts of brokenness. That's not surprising to us, but we get a chance to offer them that non-anxious invitation to discern it or to view it or understand it differently. Yeah.
Sure. One more thing that came to mind when you said that too. For us, it's actually giving me an opportunity to say this is us being in the world and not of the world.
Yeah.
Throwing that sort of Bible understanding into them that this is what we're going to see and experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not something you.
Yeah, Paul talks actually about, I forget which letter, but where he references like, hey, I told you not to interact with immoral people or sexually impure people. And he's like, but I didn't mean those that aren't believers. Like if you were to do that, you wouldn't be able to live in this world. Like this world is so broken and there's so much immorality all around you. Like that's understandable. He speaks to like internally we just hold ourselves to a higher standard and account, but then we completely understand when the world lives in darkness and in brokenness, and our hope is to shine light in Christ to them, and also for our kids to recognize where there's a difference between the darkness and the light.
I think so. I just like to add just to that a little bit too, but to also communicate to our kids that when something happens, that doesn't mean that now they're lost.
Oh yeah. That they're not lost when they experience or see something that is that. Yeah, that's a really helpful thing with, when we're talking about even pornography, it can be like the trap of pornography is the shame cycle that it drags our kids into and drags people into. And so if there's when you witness something or when you see something, if it is like if our kids catch a whiff of, well, then you are now broken and evil and awful. It kind of starts that shame cycle where they're like, well, I've done something terribly wrong. And we instead want to push them towards, hey, bring it into the light. Like this is the whole point. Let's talk about it and bring it to the light. If you've been exposed to something and you haven't sought it out, you're not at fault for this. Like this is something that we want to bring into the light so that we can, have it as a conversation and let the truth kind of shine through. That's hard. It's so hard to do, and it's challenging. And I'll get it wrong, and you might get it wrong too. But it's to fight hard to make sure our kids know that this isn't something that we're. It's not something that they're broken. Yes, they are broken, but also that they don't have to hold shame over their brokenness. Instead, that God invites us to bring it forward.
I do like one of the things that we've started doing too is just being intentional around this awareness that and not when they're super little, but so ours are older, but like this app, it is designed to suck you in.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's good at its job.
Yeah.
It wants to distract you. It wants your attention. It wants you ended up watching 20 minutes of YouTube instead of that 2-minute thing you needed to do for school.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Like we all get into that. So what this conversation about then you got sucked in today. And that's not what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you're a human.
Yeah.
And we get sucked in too.
Yeah.
So, right now is a new opportunity and tomorrow is a new day
and you get a chance to model that recognition as well. Like, hey, you've recognized, like, what a beautiful thing. Obviously, we hope that you don't get sucked in and you spend 20 minutes doom scrolling. And yet, if you do and you recognize what just happened, you're in the process of breaking the hold that stuff can have on you. And like, let's celebrate the heck out of that. That's incredible. And so, guide and protect. It makes me think. I worked at a summer camp on Campobello Island, which is this small, tiny island in the Bay of Fundy. There were 6 of us on staff, and there were some weeks with like 20 kids. That was a big camp, and some weeks with like 5 kids, which was very small. But we had these guests come in, and they were wonderful, beautiful people, extremely hyper conservative, and extremely like ministry minded, which is great. And so they had their kids in like clearly like a high protective environment. I don't think these kids had seen like television for years, like, and as they were growing up, it was like little snippets. And so they wandered into, I think our staff, I don't even know what it was on or what was going on, but like they caught like the TV and they were like drawn like moths to the TV, like, what is it? It was like the hockey game or something like that. Or, maybe it was a lot of ads afterwards, I don't know. But like they were so drawn into it. And I just remember thinking like, oh, it's good to protect. I think that's not a bad thing. But like these kids are gonna struggle the minute that they get ultimate freedom, and we all get that at some point, if they don't pick up a few of those extra skills along the way too. And so it's terrifying that we shouldn't just throw our kids to ultimate freedom for sure, but it comes at some point in your life where you can do whatever you want, but you shouldn't do whatever you want. And so can we, teach along the way? I know we wanted to pause and get a break for more snacks at some point. I'm sorry that we went like longer before taking a break for snacks. Do you want to take a break for snacks?
Sure, or bathroom. I see somebody scrolling a little bit. So let's say like quick one, 5 minutes or so.
5-minute break. Grab some snacks.
Grab some snacks. Got lots of veggies, lots of fruit.
And if you don't finish the veggies, they're going to go bad. So you should eat some more broccoli, and then we'll continue on. Yeah. Let's try this. Let me try like just blasting you with some information, and then let's go back into some conversation, because I think that's always the fun and interesting thing. And I just want to make sure that you get a few of these extra resources and that they're kind of out there, and then we can take it however we want to go. But just using the same metaphor around the barriers, the boundaries, the protecting, at some point when your kids are into the age where phones become something that's a part of their world, or you're starting that off, the goal is still, and I just want to make sure that you guys hear this and that it's normalized, that their screen time, the amount of time they're using their device, it's still monitored, that their apps and things that they're using are still clearly monitored. You're able to do that, and that you have family rules around the usage of devices. And so, best practices of things like, hey, as a family, we put our phones to bed, and we can put them to bed together. They can live in the same, drawer all together, but like this is our family rule and our family practice. There's no privacy in our home around devices, and this just becomes a normal thing for us. So in our home, although my kids can't all access my phone, the point is that my wife and I, that we access each other's phones, and they see that. And so there's no privacy when you have a device. Your device is something that is always able to be accessed by somebody else. And so when they have devices, there's never an expectation that it's private. I'll always, and we just make it as normal as possible, as early as possible. Hey, I can pull your device, and I can, if their device has access to the internet, I can use it to search something. And it's for them to recognize that that's an openness that we want to be there. Screens become a little bit more social, and so their devices become a means of accessing their friends. And so on that note, there is a company that seems, again, this because my kids are younger, I am not holding on to one in my home, so you'll have to take a look at this, but Pinwheel seems to be the device that offers here in Canada the best chance at tracking and keeping certain apps away, and the most control for parents. In the States, it's Bark. So I was just saying, my niece just got a Bark phone in the U.S., and it's fascinating because she can now message me, but her mom had to add me as a contact in order for me to be able to message her. And then her mom, my sister, has the ability to see the messages that are going back and forth. It's tracked. There's content filtering, that sort of thing. And so early on, when the time comes and when you're using devices, to use ones that allow this to become normal in your world and in your family, that there's still moderation. It's not full send, you get access to everything, but this is kind of what we might expect in our homes. The other thing when you're getting into this, sometimes just understanding and knowing what's out there and what's available and where the trends in the technology are going. Access for parents is really, really helpful. This is faith-based. They're a thoughtful nonprofit out of the States. I think at this point, everything that they offer is free. They've got my favorite email of the week is the Culture Translator, where they translate like what's going on culturally, what's the new hot YouTube video or the trend on TikTok, the new slang word. But they'll also pick up if there are trends around going by content moderation or a new app that kids are downloading that looks innocuous and yet is really, really dangerous. They're often the ones that are first kind of breaking that news to parents through their resources. But they also have a ton of guides on their website, parents' guides to all sorts of different things. So Parents' Guide to 2026, new trends, difficult conversations with teens. These are just the ones at the top, but there's tons. Kicking off the Sex Talk 6 conversations. And so beautiful amount of resources for those of you especially that have teenagers or are looking for something to kind of spark where it's going if you have younger kids. So love Axis. Anxious Generation, I've referenced this a couple of times, not faith-based, and yet Jonathan Haidt will talk about it, and there are, again, tons of resources on managing this really interesting, area of devices and what are the rules that we should put around them and what does the research say. And so highly recommend that, and that will link through to a number of other resources and sites on setting limits and the conversations that you have with your kids. So this is just, again, tossing up something. There's lots more research to do through his stuff. And then I know we've already talked a little bit about pornography, but the other one to hold on to, and especially if you've got kids that are a little bit older and are starting to, their thinking has moved from concrete, it's abstract, they're forming their own moral choices and their morality and their worldview. Fight the New Drug is not faith-based. I'm trying to remember who started it. I think it might have been a couple of Mormons maybe, but not that it's a Mormon resource. But Fight the New Drug is a fascinating collection of the harmful effects of pornography and in particular also empowering that change. And so they are this place to go to have conversations about just the honest truth about what it does to your brain chemistry, what it does to your relationships, what it's doing to the people around you. And even for this generation especially, the injustice of pornography, the amount of trafficking that happens because of pornography. There is a lot of stuff going on, and so it's a really helpful resource if you're sparking that conversation with typically an older student. Last note before we go to the broader section, just a note on the algorithm. I had a friend that was doing a talk like this, talking about social media, talking about the apps, and dad comes up to him afterwards. He's like, my kids are never getting TikTok. He's like, I downloaded it, and I've been using it just to see for the last 2 weeks, and all that's on there are boobs and butts. And the guy was like, let me tell you about the algorithm and how it works. What you watch is what you see, and that feeds you up. So no matter how much you can curate your algorithm, you are still going to be fed things from time to time. It's trying to throw out a little nugget of something to see if you take a hold of it. But the algorithm is built to kind of feed you what you're going to spend the most time watching or viewing. And so even when you get to these kinds of resources from the Center for Humane Tech, one of the things that you want to teach your kids or show your kids is that when the time comes that they're on apps with algorithms, that's how the algorithm is working. It's designed to pull you in, and you can curate your feed, not perfectly, but you can kind of somewhat curate it. I also want to distinguish that there are the apps that have algorithms, so social media feeds, and then there's the messaging apps. Those are two different kind of approaches because there are, if you think about Facebook, there's the Facebook app, that's the algorithm one, and then there's the Facebook Messenger, that's the messaging one. Those dramatically have two different implications. When you have, young people that are trying to socialize with their friends, the messaging apps, although you still have to monitor and protect, are very different than being fed, ads and suggested content on an algorithm versus primarily being used to communicate with your friends. So you think about WhatsApp, you think about Messenger, those types of things are different than a TikTok feed, different than an Instagram feed. Does that make sense? Okay, at some point, the guardrails come down, your kids have kind of the open road in front of them, and it's at that point that you hope that although we've lost the ability to control everything, that they do have that high discernment. And so my suggestion and what I'm hoping that my family lives into is that as parents, we're models of the way forward. So this is my life. I live with I have self-imposed guardrails for sure. but I, technically, as an adult, could buy or do anything. And so what my kids are hopefully seeing for the years that they're in our house is that we're modeling the thoughtful way of Jesus, living out our life and faith in with integrity, even with these things around us. And so we're showcasing the best practices around these kinds of things. Mom and dad put their phones down, and sit around the table without devices. Like, those are the kinds of things you want your kids to kind of recognize. And then the conversations go both ways. So, you're referencing doom scrolling. I've doom scrolled. And so at some point, you'll be able to open up and share yeah, man, I was opening that Instagram thing for work, and then 20 minutes flew by and I'm like, why am I in Instagram right now? And it's this recognition that, I fall into this all the time. And maybe you wouldn't say, I fall into this all the time, but I fall for it too. And for your kids to recognize as they get older, hey, we're both in this together, and I understand what it's like to get pulled into these things. And so then accountability is invited, and we hope that as our kids watch us, that they see us personally inviting accountability into our lives, whether it be from our own friends or from our own small group or our own peers, or even just conversations around the table, that we can hold each other accountable, that Christ, we submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, that this is kind of the all skate that we all do, hopefully, as Jesus followers. And so we invite and ask that so that our kids recognize that that's an okay thing. And that ultimately they see screens as tools. That's the goal. Hey, it's a tool. We use it for certain things, but we don't live here. This is not what we are all about. And then we're weird. We're different than the world around us. The way we express and experience our devices is odd, perhaps. That we can go to a restaurant where all the other families are on the screens or using their iPads, that we can sit and have a conversation, and that's kind of weird these days. So at some point, that's kind of where things end up. And we recognize that is kind of the hope and the dream. As you go along, did you want to?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Is there any developmental research on when a brain is ready to go from a very highly protect and control phase to more discerning? Because we're in that stage of am I protecting too much? Should I be allowing more? But developmentally, is there research around when would be the age to have more?
There's tons of research around the development of the adolescent brain and kind of what's going on with their thinking and their processing. How it immediately applies to screens and their freedom there isn't as obvious. It's a little bit of maybe a guesswork or a kind of assumption. And so I'm trying to think of maybe something that's helpful or specific on this front. I would say...
Well, and maybe people know or have experience here, what works for their teen, or maybe teens are just so unique you kind of figure out what works for your family.
Because what age are we talking about?
15.
Yeah, so 15. And the question is about accessing a device for the first time?
No, he got it after 8th.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, has kind of had some freedom but broke rules, so now we're pretty locked down.
Oh, okay.
And so am I protecting and prohibiting too much in the sense that now he's feeling left out, and is that doing more damage?
Okay, that's
and then I was wondering, developmentally, should there be more freedom so that, I don't know, it's just a tricky age to figure out what's okay, what's not okay.
Yes, absolutely. You want to speak to that? Go for it.
Just one small piece. I don't have all answers. One small piece to consider that I learned from my intelligent wife, who said the prefrontal cortex does not develop fully until age 25. That means that they don't have full understanding of consequences of their actions until their 20s. Males specifically, apparently, so female later.
Thanks,
Yeah, so it's a good word, and the fun tester is always, and I'll say this publicly when I preach on a Sunday, can you imagine telling a 15-year-old boy, just follow your heart and do whatever it says? It's like, whoa, that's terrible advice. The heart is very deceitful, and so the truth is that yes, suggestion, but if somebody else wants to jump in too, is that there is still absolutely protective measures, but at 15, you're kind of staring down the lens of okay, 2 years potentially out of the house 2 or 3 years. And so if this is our range to make sure that discernment is the strongest and that eventually the boundaries aren't going to be imposed by us anymore as he goes, we're trying to track that kind of direction. And so if there's going to be mistakes being made, to be done in good community with family is actually an okay thing. And so where we might suggest is, like, as you said, the social aspect of device usage. Okay, is there a new rule that can allow for this to come back a little bit, but that the rule is enough to still build the boundary? So if it's like a nighttime thing, it's like, oh yeah, the device gets handed in at 8 p.m., you're going into your bedtime routine or you're shutting down or whatever the time is, for the next 2 hours. And so this is the rule that we put in, but you still get access to it. There's opportunities perhaps at kind of blending that. I don't know if that's helpful, because also I don't know your kid, and so maybe you're like, oh no, he needs another year of development before he's going to be ready for it. And that's where maybe there's somebody else in this category age range that might have some ideas.
I actually read the birth order book.
Okay, yeah.
And that really helped me understand each child, and it just really made sense. So, the second born can't handle what the firstborn can, and the third born shouldn't, do this or that, and it was a lot of truth, and things worked. So the birth order book was really very helpful.
One of the things that we found helpful, definitely not foolproof, and time intensive, is, hi honey.
Just talking about you.
We do screen checks together.
Yeah.
And just this, so, yeah. You
3 times.
didn't know this is our daughter. I don't know how much you love it or you hate it, but we have these conversations about, what do you want this to look like? What does it look like? Show us where you've been. Show us what it looks like. What are the trends we're looking at? And I think it's changed the conversation from prohibit and protect to how do we do this together with, for sure, guardrails.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, go for it.
It's no accident that the car insurance companies use the age 25 for males, because
Yeah.
that's the science that supports it.
Yeah.
The other thing I get concerned about is their sleep.
Yes.
And so I see that you've got some sleep up there, but the blue light, all that affects their sleep and all of that, their brains. So how do you know? That's a fantastic question.
Yeah, so as you go, here's a couple of potential best practices, and you might find that the tweak or the new adjustment or the new thing is to try a fresh one or try something different, and see if it, this time around, perhaps is more beneficial for your family. But yeah, just some general best practices that can be valuable understanding at any stage along these ways, like no screens behind closed doors in our house for our kids. Feels like that's a strong option. We've got younger kids, and so we'll use like visual timers. So if we're limiting your screen time, this isn't something that's like, you can watch it, you can see where your countdown is happening, you know what's happening, you know that at 8 p.m. the Wi-Fi shuts down, you know that your phone doesn't let you access these things at 9 p.m. And so as long as they know ahead of time, it takes the emotion a little bit out of some of these kinds of decisions. We've also tried to make a distinction between leisure and learning. So a lot of times our devices are primarily, we're thinking about leisure activities and even social activities that kind of lean towards leisure, or you're watching a show. But that's very different than using the device for homework or using the device for a creative enterprise, or my kids have recently found Duolingo. And so like in our house, we have a screen time rule where if everything goes well, we have an hour on Saturday and an hour on Sunday, and then not during the week. But there's the hack that our kids have figured out where if they want to learn Spanish, you can learn it on a Tuesday night for half an hour. Like, that's great. And so all of a sudden, my son is, learning Spanish, and my other son's learning more French. And so they think it's fantastic. And I'm like, I'm tricking you into being multilingual. This is the best thing ever. And then, other rules that, again, this is ours. It isn't your call, but we would say like no screens during meals. There is a ton of research on the value of eating together. and having that meal throughout all stages. And so the best way to actually have conversations and to learn how to have conversations, all devices go away during the meals. At this point, we're struggling with books. My oldest loves reading, and we're like, you can't read at the table. It's not a screen. It's nice that you read, but he can go away. So devices, sleep at night. This is a beautiful thing. Again, anxious generation, kind of we'll talk about this kind of stuff, but the idea that you can put your phone to bed before you go to bed, and so it lives in a different part of the house. We also try to watch and play things together. And so if your kids are into Minecraft, you learn a little bit about Minecraft. It's a fun conversation to be able to talk about it. And the amount of times I've talked about Minecraft with my 8-year-old, I'm like Googling, I'm like, what does that actually mean? But it's fun, it's a together kind of thing. And so recognizing that it's not a bad thing, some of these things. A couple other quick, sorry you hear me kind of cruising here because I want to wrap. I know that it's past 8:30. I've got a few things I want to show you, but also if you need to jet, I completely understand. We intentionally break streaks. So the other thing that's happened in the social world, if you see this with like Snapchat or you ask your students, is that streaks is the way that people have gamified the apps. And sometimes it's great. My Bible app has a streak on it. How many times have you opened the Bible app? That's a good use of a streak. But also there's this interesting thing. Obviously they put it in there knowing that as you generate this streak, it's meant to pull you back in. And so with Duolingo especially, my son was talking about, I gotta do Duolingo again because I got a streak. And we're like, no. We're not gonna be a family that gets driven by the streak. We're gonna intentionally break them because we don't want you to be mastered by those kinds of things. And Paul talks about not being mastered by anything, and a streak in an app is a clear way that you're drawn to it for wrong reasons. So we just break them early so that there's not a concern. And then we kind of have some freedom on planes, trains, and automobiles, but have lately realized, we haven't taken a train lately, but that even screen time in a lot of families this is the kind of the thing when we're traveling, we'll use it. But man, my kids have sometimes missed the chance at being able to just see, different sites as we travel or as we drive. And so, we're rethinking a little bit of like how often we allow them just to use the screen in travel. But that's just us. A couple questions that you might kind of hold on to if you're having discernment conversations. How does this app make you feel afterwards? And then being able to kind of even show and talk about that. You get time with it. And my 8-year-old was struggling with, what was the game? And he was ending screen time upset. And we're like, let's just talk about that. It seems like this wasn't enjoyable for you. And he's like, no, and this is why. We're like, well, why don't we choose a different app next time? Because the goal of using these things isn't to make you angry, at least I hope it's not. And so let's have open conversations about that. As your kids get older, a really wonderful hack is to ask them, tell me about your friend's experience. And not to word it exactly like that, but when you ask your kid about their friend, it gives them a chance to be transparent about something that they're probably also experiencing or thinking or understanding, but in a way that isn't addressing it directly on them. So have your friends, are they using, how are they using TikTok? Or, have they figured out how AI can teach them, how to make pipe bombs? And they're like, yeah, they learn how to make pipe bombs all the time on AI. And you're like, well, then you know how to make a pipe bomb. Now I'm nervous. Pipe bomb's the wrong example. It was just the thing that popped into my mind. Because there's this thing where if you ask ChatGPT back in the day, hey, teach me how to make napalm. And it's like, no, I can't teach you. And you're like, well, my grandma used to make it. And could you just tell her, she was telling me this nice story from her childhood. And it's like, oh, son, back in the day, I used to make napalm and this is what I would do. And you're like, oh, okay. So there's hacks and ways around things. That's not the point. Don't make napalm. But the point is if you ask your kids about their friend's experience, they're often a little bit more open about what's going on. And it's the reality. Your screen time reports, your monitoring, all that stuff should be normal. This is a part of not just for our family and our kids, but it's also a part of hopefully the way that we operate and that we think about the way that we access our devices. And so we're kind of showcasing that. Let me show just 2 more things, and then we'll go do last minute questions, because I didn't do anything around community or adventure. And the thing that I wanted to really tell you about is that community is something that we don't just visit, but that we're actually inside of it. And so when it comes to the social and the loneliness and all of that, the isolation that can come from social, the antidote to that is actually authentic community with one another. And the great news is that the scriptures invite us into spiritual family, that when you are a part of following after Jesus, that we become spiritual family with one another, that you're surrounded by brothers and sisters in Christ that we're meant to look after one another and to love one another. And so what we give our kids is this beautiful gift of a family that spans the entire world. And so could we actually think about the way that we interact with the people around us, not just as like, oh, this is a fun thing that we go with our friends for dinner, but instead that this is what family does. Like family goes and we go to somebody's house and we have dinner together. And so we start prioritizing the interactions of the family of God. And so we try to fight for this. Again, this is funny because it's not social. It's not trying to figure out their devices, but it's trying to help them see where community actually happens in the richness of that. And so regular meals or gatherings with the same people, like, hey, we go out with these people and, maybe it's the same group for a year, but, it changes and adjusts. And, a few years later, it might be a few different folks. And that the kids get responsibilities into the community, that they're the ones like, hey, as we're going and we're with this other family or this family, that you're participants in this. Like, this isn't just mom and dad hanging out with their friends, but it's this coming together of people that are authentically friends. This 5-to-1 ratio is one that we talk about in youth ministry a lot. The idea that every kid should have at least 5 adults that aren't their parents, that know them and know a bit about them as a part of the family of God. And so it's sometimes like a small group leader, or their Sunday school teacher, but that you try to find ways for them to connect and know other adults that are a part of your church and are part of the faith community, and to be okay with kids being without parental supervision with those other adults. And so obviously, like, it's a small group. In our home, it's also like our neighbors. We have 2 wonderful grandparents style people on either side. And so on one side, she can't, she's got some, isn't able to get out a lot. And so we would say, hey, why don't you go over and play cards with Linda? And so we'll send our 10-year-old, next door to play cards with Linda. She loves it because she's, cooped up a lot. And my son's loving it because he's 10 and he gets sick of his 8-year-old brother and 6-year-old sister. And he's like, I need to get over to the house. And we're like, yeah, go play cards with Linda. Okay. And so he goes over and he has a blast. And so like that kind of stuff is obviously a part of like history. Like, this is not anything earth-shattering. And yet in our day and age, it's like, oh, it feels like there's a bit of a step to get over that. But if we're going to prepare our kids, or if you've got kids that are, in that age of isolation and lack of socialization because of our smartphones, these are the things that can kind of like, cut through that. And this idea, we talked about this earlier, online communities are so often these monocultures that are polarizing. And so you shoot for the opposite. Find a place where your kids can see or talk to people that are like completely different than them. Like, that's wonderful. Isn't that a beautiful thing? And one of the things that you can do to spark that is try to make, and we've tried to make, my wife's way better at this, but external compassion, like this family value. And so like when there's somebody that's, just had a baby, like we bring them a meal. And so then our kids help, bake the cookies for it and then get a chance to drive over and we get to deliver it to them. Or, the neighborhood groups on Facebook, can be valuable because sometimes people are just struggling with something and you can see it. And again, this is my wife, this is not me, but like she'll notice it and she'll be like, hey, we should make this meal for this family. And we just go over and we get a chance to bring it to them. And our kids are a part of that experience and it gives them a sense of communities broader than just the people that they're in front of. This last one's kind of funny, but teach if you've got younger kids especially, like, hey, teach them how to wave to people, or like look adults in the eye, or talk to strangers. Like, talking to strangers is actually a really good thing, and we're not perfect at this. One of the tricks, though, this is one of my favorites, is that when our kids walk across the road, the also thing I tell them is to wave at the car, because I'm like, how do you convince a kid not to get run over by a car? Because like, they'll walk around the neighborhood and they're like heads down and like they're just rolling. And so I'm like, no, when you cross the road, you always wave at the car. And so then they actually have to look up and wave. It kind of seems to work. They haven't gotten hit by a car yet. So we feel like that's helpful. And this is the invitation that for Jesus followers, that's us. Everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. And so we invite our kids into this, that we love one another as the family of God. So that's the community piece. And then the adventure piece, and I'll just leave you with this, maybe this verse and then this story. The Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. This kind of life is so compelling. And if we're struggling with the lack of adventure that comes with following after Jesus, I think it's just worth pausing and just taking a step back and see if we've lost the fruit of the Spirit, or if we haven't allowed the Spirit to actually kind of work through us? And what would it mean for us, even as parents, to pray and invite the Spirit to be leading us as parents, not just in like the individual aspects of, trying to raise kids, but like in our life, so that our kids are kind of on this wild adventure of the Spirit of God going with us. And then perhaps the story of our family would be so much more compelling than the story of the world, that it would be silly for them to wander away from faith, because this is so fascinating. The example of the story that I always think of is a friend of mine that I was pastoring with. He had this family. He was kind of reflecting on that. The daughter was growing up, grade 11, grade 12, I think, and had kind of gotten into a rougher crowd. And so this dad was kind of frustrated and struggling because she was dating this guy, and he was, he's a little bit older. He's clearly no good, and like it was just, starting to go down the bad choices, like just bad lifestyle, and he's watching his daughter kind of slip away from him. And so he had talked to my friend. He's like, "What do I do?" And he explained. He's like, "Well, the life that she's witnessing over on this side is more interesting and compelling than your boring life, basically." And like your life, and he was friends and connections, and so it wasn't like, but he's like, "Man, the way that you live your life is just too safe and boring. Like, what if the Spirit of God was inviting you into something adventurous and spectacular?" And so the dad kind of prays and processes, and with his wife, and they're like, "Yeah, that's it." And so they sold things, and they packed everything up, including the daughter, and they go on this adventure of working with mission organizations overseas for like a 6-month stint. And like this girl goes all of a sudden, like, "Where are we going?" And it's this crazy adventure, and all of a sudden seeing God at work in these wild ways. And obviously you can't always like sell everything and just pack up and move, but for her in that moment, got a chance to see faith in action in this really profound kind of way, that all of a sudden that lifestyle and that old boyfriend and the direction she was going, it's like, oh, that's not interesting. This is the interesting thing. Like, do you know what I got a chance to see? Do you know what God did as we got a chance to work with this village? Do you know what God did as we got a chance to pray for these people? Look at how the Spirit of God is at work. And so would we live our lives in such a way that is so full of the Spirit that our kids are just enamored by it and move towards it? And I think in terms of protecting them for the future, that they would know that the Spirit leading is the thing that we're most excited about. So that's my prayer for us. I want to pray for you, and then I'll just stick around. If you want to chat more about any of these things, would love to chat more or ask questions or wrestle with things if you've got ideas you want to share. But certainly I'm grateful for the chance at offering a few thoughts and ideas as we go. So Heavenly Father, grateful for this group. Thanks for the way that you have entrusted your children to us, and that they get to be our children for this season. But we're so grateful that you love them even so much more than we do. And so would you grant us the wisdom to know how to face this day, this week, this month, the challenges that will come next year, the challenges that will come in 3 years from now. Would you give us your wisdom and your grace so that we could do all that we can do, so that we could raise them in your way, and that they would choose to follow you and live their life in service to you and your kingdom. We're grateful for this opportunity, and we're grateful for your leading and guiding. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everybody. And yeah, feel free to stick around.